because Anastasia Miari is a travel and food writer, and I want to start off with you, Anastasia, by asking you the question of why grandmother.
You forgot about you though. We have to
It's
say
about
about you
me.
first.
Then let's talk about how we met.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Happy journey. You say.
So Anastasia found me one day.
Oh yeah.
I read coffee cups and tarot cards. I'm a fortune teller as a third, fourth occupation. And I have put this on Airbnb experiences to sell it to tourists as an experience, as a local thing that you can try and you cannot find anywhere else. And that's how you found out about me. And then you somehow found my number and texted me. And so one morning I received a message from this very energetic sounding young woman says, I found out about you. I'm doing these retreats, and I want to have your experience for my guests who will be in Athens on this date. I think it was March or April.
It was
February.
March, yeah.
And that's how we met with Anastasia. And then after a while, we started to understand that we have many things in common. And,
But we should explain that I met you at the Magic Kitchen, and we should say about the Magic Kitchen.
Yeah, we had our first meeting in the Magic Kitchen, which is my project. It is a immigrant-run eatery, cooperative vegan eatery in Exarchia. So we had our first meeting there with Anastasia.
She made me Greek coffee and read my coffee.
What did she see?
She saw some stuff that I walked away and I was like, whoa. And I really try not to give very much away. But then when she was saying things, I was like, yeah. And then I walked away thinking, wow, she's legit. Like, she knows, she's got it. We connected on many things, though, not just that.
Yeah, food and grandmothers are the two subjects that we connect on, and they are the subjects of this night, I feel. Like grandmothers and food and traditions and
I
lines.
think heritage and the things that pass through lines of women within families, no?
Yeah.
Because you also can relate to that, right?
Yeah, in a way. Though my grandmother never reads coffee cups, she would find it very strange. She finds it very strange that I do it, actually. Anyhow. So Anastasia, you have already written one book about grandmothers, grand dishes. This is your second book about grandmothers. The first book was about grandmothers around the world, right?
Yeah.
And the second one is about Greek grandmothers. Would you like to tell us a bit about the special thing about the grandmothers?
So first of all, I'll say that the whole thing started with my yaya, who is obviously Greek. And Grand Dishes started as a project because a friend of mine came to photograph my yaya in Corfu on a holiday, and the photos that we had were really beautiful. And my yaya is also very classic Greek yaya, like very stoic and stern, and has lived a hard life, but also hilarious and very comedic in the way that she presents herself. She's a character. So Ella, who came and photographed my yaya, captured her in the very best light and took some really romantic photos, and I put those on Instagram. And then lots of people started contacting me saying, I have a grandma. So Grand Dishes sort of came about because it started as a personal project of documenting my yaya and her recipes on Instagram. And then I was living in London at the time, and lots of friends in my circles in London said, can you come and photograph my granny and do what you did for your granny? And so the first thing that I wanted to say about grandmothers is this thing that unites us all with our grannies is like lots of us have memories of cooking with our grandmothers in the kitchen, and we all have a different relationship to our grandmothers than we do to our mothers. It's a different relationship. It's a different bond that we have. It's maybe one with a lot less tension.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think it's a topic that many people can relate to. And it's maybe why I feel always very welcomed when I talk about this project, because even I'm not very hard to talk to, but some people can be quite stiff. But I find like even people who are very awkward and hard to open up to, or like I find it difficult getting things out of them. If I talk to them about this project, somehow they will open up and start telling me personal stories. So yeah, grandmothers are special, and I think they're special to a lot of us,
Yeah.
or grandmother figures, let's say.
Yeah. Generally, like even though people don't have good relations, they may not have good relations with their mother. They will have one grandmother or some aunt, old aunt somewhere who will be sympathetic and who will have taken care of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's totally a unifying subject, let's say. And so in the beginning, grandmothers were coming to you, like you.
Their grandkids were.
Their grandkids were coming to you, and they were bringing you their grandmothers for you to include them in your project.
Yeah, so people, for example, a friend of mine, Ria, I was working a very boring office job in London. She was Indian, and she was like, "Oh, you should come and speak to my grandmother who grew up in Tanzania, and she's of Indian heritage, and she lived in Leicestershire in the UK." It was so random, and the most amazing thing for me was that I got to travel to Leicestershire in this part of the city. Well, I never would have gone to Leicestershire in the first place, but I got invited to go and stay at her grandmother's house for 2 days over the weekend. I just got sort of like embraced by this Indian family living in Leicestershire. So it was kind of amazing because yeah, grandkids were coming to me asking me to go and feature their grandmother, because I guess like they also got a story out of their grandparents, and the beautiful photographs, and obviously the recipe that is very intangible, and lots of people find it difficult extracting recipes from their grandparents, right? For sure, with my yaya, I ask yaya to tell me how she makes the fagies, and she says, an onion, fagies, aladi, go, that's it. And I'm like, okay, if I did that, it's not going to taste how you make the soup. So yeah, I don't know. I think I've got off on a tangent here, but
It's fine. It's something that, like, one question that occurred to me now, I hadn't thought of before. It's this: like, most of the time, people are welcoming. Most of the time, they will open their arms and they will have good vibes, and you will leave the room feeling well, probably. But sometimes people are not very welcoming. They want to hide things. Sometimes you have negative experiences with them. This has never happened to you with any grandmother. Like, didn't you ever feel drained of energy, or didn't you ever feel, oh, this person is looking at me weirdly?
no, I feel like everyone. So the whole process is I speak to the grandkid usually first, or I speak to the person who's hooking me up, like the granny dealer. So I speak to them first, and then I ask them a series of questions. I ask them about, like a typical regional dish that is easy for them to make, that is their go-to, something that they feel very naturally drawn towards to cook for a stranger. I explain that I will come into their home and I will cook with them. And yes, I'm a stranger, but I'm just another person that's keen to understand about their heritage, their culture, their special recipe that they have to pass on. And I think most of the time, if the grandma gets past that and says yes, she's just up for doing it. Like I don't think I've had a situation. No, I always feel really welcomed. I think either I've been really lucky, or I'm just very good at screening and knowing when someone is not a go. In fact, one time I had a very welcoming grandma who was Chinese. This was for the first book, Grand Dishes. She didn't make it into the book because I was told by the grandson, she's great, she cooks, you're gonna love it, we need to get her in the book. And then I show up and we drove 5 hours to get to Wales, and there was a storm. It was almost like I couldn't open the door because the wind was sort of like pushing at the door so much. And then we get into this grandma's house. She's so lovely, and we stayed at her house overnight. But then the next day when I started to interview her and to ask her about her recipes, because there's a usual, like I start usually asking her like, what are you going to cook for us today, and how long have you been cooking it? And she said, I'm going to make this. I don't usually cook. My husband usually cooks, but I'll do it today because you showed me how to do the recipe yesterday. And I was like, okay. And then so I was sort of like trying to salvage it because we'd taken a long trip to get to find her. And then I was sort of saying like, like, what do you like to do? What's your, what do you do if you don't cook in your spare time? What do you like doing? And she's like, I like shopping. I really like shopping and I like going on cruises. And so, not that there's anything terribly wrong with shopping or cruises, but
Not the brand
it wasn't super aligned with the brand values, which is all about, like slow, conscious eating, going back to how my yaya lives and lived when she was younger. So she was actually lovely and really welcoming, but sometimes it has happened where someone hasn't quite ticked the boxes when you get there. But never have I had someone say like, oh no, be funny with me, because I think if we've had that whole screening process before, then they're usually up for hosting. And it's really nice. It's very humbling to be welcomed into someone's home like that.
Yeah.
And the Greek grandmas, my God. Greek grandmas, Georgian grandmas. I haven't been to Tunisian yet. Azerbaijani, my God, like I've had the best hospitality. They just do not let you finish. Like you've just got to keep eating. It's the best.
Yeah, in Hansel and Gretel, the witch wants to fill up the children so that they will get greasy and so that she can eat them afterwards. In patriarchal cultures, the elderly woman is something to be feared. As much as it is loved and respected, it is also an object of fear. It is the unknown thing because it is believed that she has special powers and she can harm you as well as she.
I think that's interesting because also we don't really hear from older women in mainstream media, and I don't know if it was a very conscious decision, but it's something that I've discovered over 7 or 8 years of doing this project, that after the age of 40 you kind of like drop off the map. You're not really like visible. And what I've actually found from when I go into the homes of these women is suddenly they like blossom and they become even bigger characters and bigger versions of themselves because they have not really had this treatment. Marco, the photographer who's here, he like comes in with his camera and they're like suddenly the star and they're like, being asked to pose, and I don't know, it's nice to see them come into their own and like have that moment that maybe they haven't had for a long time. So it's interesting what you say about like, the older woman being something to be feared or something to be shunned, or I don't know, someone that we don't see a lot of because when I'm 80, I want people to still want to come and see me and hang out with me.
That would be a lot of fun then, no? Like you will be independent, you will have lived most of your life, and you will be knowing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've learned a lot from. So usually, because I'm a journalist and I'm not a chef or a recipe writer, a big part of why I do this is learning about the women and their stories and what their food says about their life and vice versa. And an interesting part for me is always asking them about their lives. And I feel like starting this project in my 20s and now I'm in my early 30s, I've learned a lot about life from these women. I think it's probably over 100 grandmothers over the age of 80 that I've cooked with and spent time with now. And I ask them about love and life, and you just remind, the reason I'm saying this is that you reminded me of a table of artist women that I sat at and ate lunch with in Croatia 5 years ago. And they were all over the age of 70, and they were on this private island of this incredible grandmother that I cooked with, and she she's one of the biggest art collectors in Croatia, and she hosts female artists for retreats and like residencies in the off-season months. And so we sat at this table having lunch, and I remember this lady saying to me, she was super beautiful, she was like 70 something, she had the most amazing turquoise eyes, she's called Dagmar. I remember her looking at me and being like, have fun with boys now. Those hormones, they're all going to change after the menopause, and it's going to be the best thing that ever happens to you. And I was like, wow, this makes me so excited to get old. So rather than, obviously like getting old is something that we all, I don't know, speaking from experience now that I'm getting a lot more wrinkles, I sometimes get anxious about aging, but then I remember these conversations that I have with these older women. And when you say, oh, that'll be good when you're 80 and you're independent, and I'm like, yeah, it probably will be great, because Dagmar told me that we get loads more testosterone and become more like men, and yeah, we come into our own after the age of 50 or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, people say this in general, that as a woman, especially as you grow older, you just become more independent, less careful about people, less of a pleaser.
Yeah.
We shall see. All of us are in the process of seeing. Anyway, I wanted to, now that we come to the life stories of these grandmothers, going through the book, I saw, like, it's very interesting. If you have checked the book, almost every recipe comes with a life story. So we hear about the woman where she lives, and they tell us about their lives, how they grew up, why they make the food, how they make the food. And you learn a lot of these little historical details, or a lot about their perspectives. Like there's this one, Yaya Theodora, who's commenting about extramarital relationships. She says, I never knew any men other than my own, and I don't understand what the young are doing these days.
Yeah.
And it was not like ours.
Yeah.
So I want to stay a bit on these historical notes because I think they're super interesting. It's like you have a profile of a whole generation of Greek women coming from different places, from different life experiences, and giving you little snapshots.
Yeah. Not just like the personal stuff as well, because obviously I travelled all the way around Greece for this book, and I feel like this book is like it's like a tapestry of Greece. It's like a history book of Greece and what was happening in Greece at the time, but then told through the voices of these women that, you know, usually history books are written by men. And so I found it interesting hearing from, I don't know, women who had been refugees post-war and had to go and live in refugee camps in Egypt. I had no idea about this, that you know, during the Second World War, there was a migration, and, you know, Greek people had to leave. They had to go elsewhere, and many of the people that lived in the east of Greece actually went and lived in Egypt.
Yeah, Palestine.
Yeah, I had no idea. So it was a massive learning for me, not just on a life lessons note, but also learning about Greece and my own history from these women.
So you learned about historical events, and what else? Like, writing this book, did it change your perspective about how life was, or how it must be?
How life was and how it
Like,
must be.
What kind of inner process was it for you talking to all of these older women?
They surprised me a lot, like with their opinion. Like, I think I learned a lot about Greece and Greek people because obviously I'm from Kerkira, and Kerkira is the far west. We're practically like next to Italy. So traveling to Castellorizo, which it's practically Turkey, right? It's like it's basically Turkey. It's just underneath Turkey. I found it fascinating hearing. So my dad is a Greek guy from a Greek village. He's the most typical like Greek person that you could meet, and he's like, the Turkish, they're gonna come, they want to invade, and I'm like, okay, this is like the Greek opinion, you know, like this is the hoi polloi or whatever. And then going to Castellorizo, I meet people, and they're like, oh yeah, our Turkish neighbors, they come over, and you know, we celebrate Pascha together, and then we all head over to the Turkish mainland, and we go shopping on a Friday, and we go like to the market, or we go to we're invited to their weddings. And I just felt like there's a whole other side to Greece that I haven't or I hadn't been acquainted with yet, and it felt very humbling to see that not everyone's so racist. Yeah, and I felt like I learned that there's like a real mixing of cultures here in a way that I hadn't realized before. And it reflects in the food. Like I met one Yaya in Mytilene, and we made stuffed onions. And I was like, so stuffed onions, like this is the thing in Mytilene? And she's like, no, it's not a thing in Mytilene. It's the thing all like towards like the Eastern Turkey. If you eat anything stuffed in Greece, it's from Migresia. It's from that way. And I was like, oh wow, okay, like it was very enlightening in that perspective.
Yeah, I noticed it too, going through the stories of the
Yeah,
Yiayias.
there's loads.
Like, I'm from Turkey, by the way, for those of you who don't know.
We should have said that.
Yeah, we should have said that. So,
the ultimate meeting of minds, like what's happening down the road.
oh yeah.
Very good timing.
They should get us in there and they should come here.
Yeah, so in the book, Turkey is referred to a few times, like, as you could expect, because in Greece, half of the population at some point were refugees from Turkey, and it has a huge border with Turkey, and all of these islands that are like next to Turkey, and so on and so forth. So it is indeed interesting that there are these Yiayias. There's one Yiayia, I don't remember her name. She says something like, "This is a peaceful place, even though Turkey is right there. It's very peaceful here."
I know which one. This is another one in Lesbos.
Yeah, this is another one.
Yeah.
This is not this one.
Yeah.
And then again, like, I study history. I am doing a PhD right now, but still, I learned from these Yiayias some things that I didn't know, such as the building regulations in Lesbos
This is
for
great.
Christians.
This was great.
Yeah, so there were certain, like you couldn't build above certain square meters if you were a Christian subject of the empire, or maybe it also depended on your class as well. So these people in Lesbos built their houses in such a way that they would occupy a certain square meters that was fit to the limitations.
On the ground level.
Yeah, on the ground level.
Yeah.
And then they would grow towards the outside from the first floor.
It's a medieval urban law.
They
Yeah.
were trying to pay less taxes or something, right?
It's from the medieval, even in Turkey, and have the same rule.
Yeah.
So has anyone been to Mytilene? Like the houses are strange there. The architecture is super weird. And I was like, why is this? why are all these like random turrets? And then I found from the grandma, she knew loads about the history of Mytilene. So it was interesting.
Yeah, so totally. This is the most interesting thing I found about this book. Like, you get all of these stories, and it's also the way you chose them, right? You try to give a little glimpse of everything, I guess, because some of them are talking about their husbands, some of them are talking about their childhood, some of them about...
I don't know if that was very, I didn't plan that really. I just like when you're cooking with someone, people let their guard down a bit easier. So usually I don't sit and do a formal interview, but I cook and I have my phone on record and I try and capture little snippets of what they say. And I don't tend to, rather beyond the normal questions of why this recipe? Oh, talk to me about what you know about this recipe. When did you start cooking it? Beyond that, I kind of let the yaya or the grandmother share whatever she wants to share. And amazing things come. I learned stuff about my yaya's sister, like super personal stuff that I just was like, wow, I didn't really know the full story. And now that I know the full story, I'm so shocked on your behalf. Like, I'm upset on your behalf kind of thing.
This Yaya who, her husband left her when she was very young, and then he came back.
Yeah.
He came back after many years and expected to live as if nothing has happened.
Yeah. And he had another kid, and anyway, all of this stuff came out even about my own yaya. And what I have realized from doing this for many years now as well, often because I have my granny dealer, the grandchild, usually comes to me and says, I didn't know that about my grandmother. And sometimes they're the translator, because the first book was done all over the world. So I don't speak every language, unfortunately, so I would have someone help me translate. And these stories would come out and they wouldn't... often the grandchildren don't even know the stories. So I find that pretty fascinating, what comes out of people and what this is Fiesta Mateya. She's my yaya's sister. What the flavors and the senses and what the senses of being in the kitchen and cooking bring out of a person, like the memories that they evoke and the way that they make people feel more at ease and willing to share. which is amazing because as a journalist, sometimes I have to call someone and do an interview over the phone or do a Zoom interview, and it's a bit like, so, you know, it's never as good as when I'm doing this. So this is my favorite way of interviewing.
Yeah. So food in general is considered intangible heritage, right? Like it's like songs. Okay, now songs are recorded and we write them down, but in the past it wasn't like this. And it's the same thing for food. Like you can write down the recipes, but then measurements change and tastes change across the geographies.
And
So-
ingredients.
And ingredients,
Yeah.
of course. So this book seems to be an attempt of trying to capture
Yeah.
that intangibility at a certain point of history.
Yeah.
Like once again, I have the image of a photograph, of a snapshot of a process that's going on and things that are changing, and you try to get a shot of it.
I feel like I should read something from this because I've just remembered. I think I've written it better than I will say it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. The reason that I'm doing that is because I want to capture obviously the recipes that my yaya makes, because I want to be able to pass those on to my daughter, and I want the dish to taste exactly like how my yaya makes it for me, and I'm lucky enough to still have her. But another part of it is you've seen them all up here, but the yaya that we know that I'm referencing in this book and that Marco has done an amazing job of capturing in his photos is this yaya that's still dressed in black, that sometimes wears her madili around her head, that is living a sort of life of simplicity that we don't live anymore, and that the future yayadas are not going to know. I'm just going to read this. Sorry for anyone who has the book already. Yaya was my first word. Greek for grandmother, it has a harsher sound which suits my own Greek grandmother down to the ground. Like many Greek yayadas, my own is not a cutesy, cuddly granny sat at home doing the knitting. She's a grafter, a hardened woman who came of age during the post-war years in which most of Greece was still in poverty and experiencing civil unrest. Grandmother seems too soft of a word to use for my gutsy yaya, who savagely pulls the innards out of fish and slops them aggressively into the bowl she's working with, is prone to angry outbursts and still sweats over an open flame to prepare a meal. In my most formative years, Yaya took on the role of chief care provider while my parents worked. This meant accompanying her to fertile muddy fields and watching her thwack the ground with a hoe before planting tomato seeds that would grow into giant red baubles come June, or heading out into Corfu's torrential rain in October to pick olives from wizened old olive trees that weren't at all dissimilar to Yaya's lined, weather-beaten face. I once watched her kill a snake right in front of me. It slinked its way through overgrown weeds towards me, but before I'd even had a chance to cry, Yaya had sprung into action. She picked up an axe and swung at it fearlessly until the snake was just a writhing, wriggling tail. In Greece, there's a saying, "Tu παιδιού μου το παιδί, δυο φορές το γέννησα. My own child's child is mine twice over." My crude translation doesn't do it justice, but the general gist is that grandparents here see themselves as parents twice over. In my case, Yaya was another maternal figure. This book is an obvious dedication to her, but also to the women in Greece like her. Though they might not all be yayadas in the sense that they have grandchildren, they are a breed of powerful matriarchs. They have the will to get up every morning in spite of illness, loneliness, and the complaints of old age, and they cook themselves a dish from scratch, purely for the sake of giving themselves the pleasure that only a home-cooked meal can give. They took care of the finances at home, and they raised families while their husbands were off fighting wars, working on cargo ships to send money home, or else just off with other women. In an unashamedly patriarchal society, it is our yayadas that have come off the strongest and that have, for more often than not, lived the longest. Despite the sometimes awful hypocrisy that they've had to face in life, these women are still here, they are alive, and they are spirited. This book is a distillation of their lives and experiences in the form of anecdotes, regional recipes that make up the complex and compelling tapestry of this country I call home. I'm fully aware that grandmothers of our world are not in short supply, but this specific breed, this is what I was getting at, This specific breed, the Greek Yaya, won't be around in a couple of decades. At least not in the sense that I have known them, dressed in morning black, sat behind beaded curtains in whitewashed houses, hunched over in fields foraging for horta, or waiting patiently for a briki to brew a rich, silty coffee. The generation succeeding my yayas drive their own cars, have jobs, get manicures, and they make pites with ready-made phyllo pastry bought from the supermarket. In my village in Kerkira, you can still spot the odd yaya walking back from her allotment, mandili, the headscarf, wrapped around her head, atop of which is perched a basket of produce balanced with the precision and expertise of a street performer. These are the peers of my yaya Anastasia, the last generation of women in black that hold the secrets to living off the land. Sorry. I'm cooking the regional dishes that say more about Greece than any history book can. This is my ode to them, to my yaya, and to the great food of Greece. Sorry. I just... Yeah.
I want to say something at this point. When I was 6 years old, we moved from Izmir to Istanbul. In Izmir was my yaya. And I thought of her as my main parent, my main caretaker. Of my own mother, I was scared. She was too young, too strong, too pretty. She had my father, like it was just too fearful. And as soon as we moved to Istanbul, like I became an unhappy child. I was crying every night. It always felt like my grandmother was about to die and she would be lost, and everything else, the whole world we knew, was about to be lost. And I felt like every second that I didn't spend with her was lost, because it was something that was already disappearing. And when you talk about your grandmother and this generation of grandmothers that you believe are disappearing, I feel the same kind of nostalgia or like missing something that is already there. And I'm not sure if they will actually disappear. Why do you think they will disappear?
Because what I was saying was that, okay, like, for example, the new generation of yaya, which is obviously my dad is now papu, right? And so his sisters are the equivalent of yayadas. They don't roll filo like a yaya rolls filo. They can go, they're like a time of convenience. And of course, we all are. Of course, it's easy to go and buy filo from a supermarket, so you're not going to stand and learn the art of rolling filo. And this is just one example. But in terms of cooking and the way that we make food, these women also had a lot more time on their hands, right? I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but it's definitely a moment in history that I want to extol and revere, because we all have jobs, because we all have careers, we also have, we can't do everything, we also have less time. I can't stand and learn from someone. I went to Thessaloniki and Halkidiki, and I met these amazing women, and I came back and I was like, I need to learn how to roll filo. This is impossible. Like, they like do it. It's second nature, but that's not, oh, I do it 3 times and I can make the perfect pita. I can't roll filo and I have to do it for 70 years to be able to make the filo in the way that these women do it. So, and that's just one example, right? Like, times have changed and we can't stop society moving on, and for us changing it's great, because it also means that the gender gap has changed also, and we have the choice to not have children, we have the choice to have less children than women at that time in certain societies and certain social classes didn't have a choice, and out of necessity they became the yayadas that I'm talking about, and they lived hard lives, and our lives are a lot easier. But I think in the way that I know them, no, they're not going to exist. They're not going to exist. They also are not. They're not so into wearing the morning black anymore. Like, they are driving their own cars. They do go to the super. Like, it's all these things that take away from that, like the magic and the simplicity of what my yaya is all about. Like.
So here you are talking about the loss of a certain lifestyle that is more rural, that is
Yeah.
more
Yeah, for sure.
self-sustained.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this takes me to another note that I have made reading the book, that people mention sharing their food and vegetables with each other. Like neighbors picking tomatoes and zucchini and whatnot, and sharing it with their neighbors who had other things. And
Yeah.
people picking wild greens and snails because they didn't have much to eat.
Yeah.
And this certainly is something that's being lost. And maybe you could speak a bit about this, like this sharing part.
Yeah. I mean, it depends, right? It depends on, obviously in Athens, there's not so much of that, but I think it exists still between families, and for sure in Greece. If you live in Greece and you have family nearby, someone's coming over with a pasticcio. Like it's, all my friends who have their Greek family here, their mums or their Yiayias, someone's always coming over to the house to share a pasticcio with them. But what I'm talking about here is the sharing of produce, because people in rural villages around Greece, for example, in August, we have too many figs on our fig tree. There's so many figs. I've got like 10 jars of jam here. I've got more jam in the fridge in Corfu. I don't know what to do with all these figs. So I collect all the figs and I go and take them to my godparents who have a farm next to the house. And then maybe my godparents might, I don't know, slaughter a lamb and like have me over for Sunday lunch and be like, this lamb is for you. And they're holding it up and it's, like been skinned. And I'm like, thanks. I don't know if that necessarily is being lost so much, because it's still happening for sure in villages around Greece. It still happens in my village. But I know that in my generation and my cousins, not so many people are like out on the land, like tending to their vegetable patches. They're like, go to Vasilopoulos and buy some avocados.
It's the marketization that doesn't allow this to happen anymore.
Yeah.
Because in a rural lifestyle, you have scarcity and you have abundance at the same time.
Yeah.
Like you won't have enough cheese maybe, but you have too many figs and you won't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So I feel like many yayadas, many grandmothers in this book were talking about that interplay between abundance and scarcity.
Which brings in seasonality as well, and eating by the seasons and doing what you can with what you've got. Which is another thing that I say that I would like. I like to live by this, I hate the supermarket. I much prefer going to buy my food from Laiki. And I won't cook a recipe that isn't in season. I won't think, I'm gonna make, I don't know, some like a tomato caprese salad. No, I'm not gonna do that because tomatoes are terrible now. Like that's just, and I think I'm trying to, in my own way, adopt the way of life that I was raised with, like, and the way of life that I lead when I'm at Yiayias in the summer, when I'm in Kirkira.
Yeah. And so I want to come back to the book now. In the book there are many recipes, I think about 70, 80, I couldn't count, but must be around that number.
Give or take.
And I guess you paid attention to how easily the ingredients can be found in other places, no? Because people will read this outside of Greece as well.
I have a really good recipe tester in London.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't do all my own recipe testing. I did the recipes once, and then I have amazing Jasmine who's in London, and she basically, I test the recipe once after cooking it myself with a grandma. So another part of the process is I'm there with a pair of weighing scales, insisting on them like weighing everything that they do, which obviously they always get pissed off about. So after that phase of cooking it with them, then I go home and I cook it and I write the recipe again. And then I send it to Jasmine, and then Jasmine does a test. And if that test isn't quite right, then she'll do a second test or a third test. She's very diligent and amazing, and much better than I am at that. So I'm very grateful that I have an amazing recipe tester who's also finding the equivalent ingredients in the UK for a UK market, which usually tends to be similar for a US market and an Australian one. Like rice, like the rice for risotto. I'm like, oh, I obviously write Risi Carolina, and then like, you know, Jasmine's like, what the fuck is Risi Carolina? You know, like she's having to like go, and I'm like, I don't know what you do. Yeah, so I'm very grateful to have actually. There's so many people that it's not just me that's, you know, like the person doing this book. A big part of this book is the imagery, and that's Marco. Like he's the one. This is Marco. Like this is not. That's pregnant me. No, this is Marco. Half of it is the photography and the portraits and the beautiful landscapes, and then of course there's Jasmine who does all the extra recipe testing, and a huge part of it also is the women and their grandchildren, the people that are like the go-betweens trying to organize these women that have not had an appointment to get to for a very long time, so don't understand the concept of like needing to show up on a certain day. You know, they're always like, yeah, come, we'll talk about it when you come. And I'm like, yeah, no, like there's a budget and, you know, like we're paying money to get on a flight to come to you, so we kind of need to book a date. And they're like, yeah, around then. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So obviously there's always the grandchild that's having to. So yeah, it's
To translate between two lifestyles, though.
yeah,
Your schedule and their schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And the
it's an
photos are amazing, by the way. The photos are very good. Bravo. You had the idea of making this book with photos from the beginning, or did it
Yeah.
come up in the process?
Can't do a cookbook without photos. Also, it's Greece, you know, and also the grandmothers, you have to see them. No, it started with a photo. It started with photos of my yaya, so there's no way that there wasn't going to be that element to it. Yeah, and Marco manages to capture the humour and the lightness in these women in a way that I think most people would struggle to. Yeah.
And I'm getting to the end of my questions, so you can start preparing your questions. We will
If you
continue.
haven't.
But I still have one. Like, I wanted to know, how has working on this book changed the way you travel, and how it has changed the way you cook, if it has?
I don't think it's changed the way I cook because I always I was raised with my yaya, and so I have an idea of the seasonality, knowing what's in season. But for sure, the way I travel, because not just with this book, but with the first book, especially Grand Dishes, and I'm about to potentially be doing the third one. It wasn't just in Greece. It was, you know, I went to Cuba, I went to Mexico, I traveled all around Europe. I went to like strange parts of Poland that I would never visit, where I'm not going to visit someone's grandmother, and it seems very obvious, but now I always make a point of finding a local in the city and getting tips from them. Even if I'm not going to cook with someone local, which usually I do try and do, or like do a foodie thing in that city, I try and get my tips. If not beforehand, when I'm there, I speak to people who are locals of the place and ask, where do you eat? Like, where would you go for X, Y, and Z? Rather than like, where's the hot, new, trendy place? I also want to know like the equivalent to a, you know, like a taverna in, I don't know, wherever, like Mexico City or whatever. Because in Mexico City, you know, there's that whole foodie scene. But actually, what I want to know is, where does that abuelita go and have her food? So I think it's made me a better food journalist, because I am more I'm more into interrogating where I could go and find places that say something about a place and reflect the authenticity of the place. So yeah, for sure, it's changed the way I travel. But yeah, not so much the way I cook, because I think it's very innate, because I've been cooking with my grandmother since I was tiny.
Okay.
Yeah.
One last question, something that's important for me, because I find it very difficult to take measurements from people who are cooking since forever, and they know how much they
They
cook.
don't
like
give you the
a
measurement. photos.
A bit of something.
They don't give them to you. You have to take them. How? You physically do it. Like they, for example, if someone's making a cake, I would go and they're trying to pour the flour straight in, and I'll say no, 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 and I'll put my scales down and I'll put the bowl on top of the scales and I'll turn the scales on and they'll pour the flour in as they would have, but I just add the extra. I have the addition of the scales underneath the bowl, and I make sure that I'm constantly noting down. And often they'll be like, oh no, it needs more flour. So then of course I have to go with the scales again, and I have to make a note of how much more. But cooking for me is never like a precise thing, and I make a point of saying that in the book. Like we should all be a bit more relaxed about like not having to keep specifically to a recipe. Important things are using ingredients that are in season, and like produce that is locally available to you, or like decent produce. And another thing is that Yiayias use a lot of oil there. Like they use like, sometimes one recipe is like this much of a glass of oil, and I don't skimp on that stuff because that's the flavor. Like that's what actually makes it good. Maybe that's the thing that I learned most about, like from actually watching these women cook. They really don't go easy on. It's very simple ingredients. It's Mediterranean cooking, right? There's never that many things, but it's like loads of oil, quite a bit of salt, loads of garlic. Like it's everything. Like it's a lot. It's more than what you might expect it to be. And when I was cooking, I remember when I lived in London, I just do a little drizzle of olive oil. Nah, it's not a drizzle. It's like glug, 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 glug. And then just when you think it's too much, you carry on a bit longer. And that's how you make a really good fried egg. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So, are you putting more oil in the food now?
Yeah, for sure. More oil, more salt, more everything. Yeah.
So am I. I think we are getting older.
You'll live to be 105.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Bring
Thank
on
you.
that testosterone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So now we can go on with your questions. I'm sure that
if you have them.
I have two questions. One is, when you go visit these Yiayias, do you stay with them as well?
Sometimes we have stage, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Okay.
few times.
And how has that been? Like
The
staying
Chinese
with them
lady,
actually?
the Chinese lady was really funny because there was three of us in
She
the
took
bed.
you shopping.
Not with the Chinese lady as well, but yeah, there were three of us in the bed because that was the first book, so there was three of us on that project, and we were not. It was like a tiny. She was like, "Yeah, I've got room for all of you," and we were sort of expecting like, I don't know, like 2 beds, but it was like one small double bed. I remember Ellen, the photographer, was just curled up at the bottom like a cat. No, it's usually great. I mean, I'm trying to think, like Marco, did we stay at any Yiayia's houses last time? The last.
Oh yeah, we did.
We stayed at in Mitilini, but it wasn't her. It was her granddaughter's house.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was fun. Like they were just super welcoming and very. It's just lovely. Like to
Typically-
show up, you've never met the person before, and they're like, "Oh, here's your room," and you're like, "Okay."
It's like
this is
typically
so
2 or
nice.
3 nights.
No, the last book was mental, so the last book was only. I think it was. I know we stayed 2 nights, didn't we?
It was one night.
Really?
None of us didn't sleep.
Was it? Yeah, it was on a really loud road. Yeah, no, I mean it depends. Like this book was crazy because I was pregnant and we were trying to do so many trips back to back, but I feel like we didn't stay very long each time because it was like get as many grandmas as possible, like get all the Yiayias in as fast as possible.
And my second question is, are all the Yiayias you have visited and cooked with in the book, or did you have to edit?
Edited. It's like very funny.
I mean, there must have been some that were not as exciting, right? And not as interesting
Yeah.
stories to tell,
Yeah.
probably, right? So you have
It's more like, I think, like more of a recipe thing, like
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah. The recipe wasn't quite right, or like the photos don't like,
yeah.
photos aren't quite right. I mean, you also have to go through so as well as going through me, Marco, and Jasmine, then it gets to the editor, and the editor goes through everything. And So there's a whole round that goes to Hardy Grant, my publishers as well. So sometimes people get axed. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It was
Yeah.
a beautiful time. Very moving.
Thank you.
Was there any recipe that really, by the way, thank you, that's amazing. I was like smiling all the way through, so good. And crying at the appropriate points. Was there one recipe that like really kind of amazed you, surprised you, like something you've cooked like forever and then you found some granny in Skiros doing it a different way and you think, I want to do it this way always, or cooking something you thought would be yuck and then it was amazing?
When you say yuck, I'm like, oh yeah, there was something that I thought was yuck, but it actually was yuck. I was pregnant with snails. Marco loved it. He ate the whole bowl. No, something that I found amazing. There's one that I'm really like, I like can't believe I have this recipe, and I can't believe that I just have it at my fingertips now. It's this guy called Mr. Belos, and he's this old guy that has this restaurant in Corfu that many of my friends have said is the best restaurant they've eaten at in Greece. It's so good. And Mr. Belos is big on like produce, but behind every great man is a great woman, because Mrs. Belos taught me the recipe, and it's Edo, my partner, his favorite thing to eat. It's octopus tifado. It's like an octopus macaronada. So it's slow cooked octopus in like a red spicy salsa in the traditional Corfiot way with macarona, with pasta. It's so effing good. Like it's one of the best things that you will eat. And when I did the recipe test, I invited people over and we all ate it together. It was people that had eaten at Belos's before, and they were like, "You've nailed it." And I was like, "I have not nailed it. It's theirs. It's their recipe." I don't know. It was amazing. I can't actually believe that she would share that with me. Like she, you know, Mr. Belos kept walking in and telling her how to do it, and she was like.
Yeah, what a gift, right, to get that secret.
And he was getting pissed off because he thought we were going to eat it afterwards, and Marco was like, spent like an hour just like turning the plate, doing this, doing that. And he kept coming out being like, "It's going to go cold, why aren't you eating it?" And we were trying to pick up the tentacles and like clean the tentacles of it so it looked like an octopus and not just any random piece of meat. And it was just so funny. But yeah, the recipe is incredible and the photo came out very well, and we did eat eventually, but it was a bit cold, but it was fun.
That's amazing.
Because now we can recreate the recipe at any time. So can all of you.
So you mentioned how it's a sort of snapshot of history and a glimpse into this kind of increasingly lost way of life. Are there specific recipes which are from various parts of the country which are truly at risk of being lost if they're not captured? Or are there kind of many daily recipes that younger generations are also still making?
I think it's a nice mix. There's a really nice Yanko recipe in there that I don't see many young people making so much anymore, which is another Corfiot recipe. There's also another Corfiot recipe from a lady called Vasiliki, and she has this incredible archive of old Corfiot recipes that I've never even heard of before, and that my yaya has never even heard of. And it's she has a cookbook from like 200 years ago of her husband's great grandmother or whatever, who noted all these recipes down. And it's called the zorka pie, and it's called the naked pie. And when I asked my yaya about it, she had no idea. And Vasiliki was saying like, this is what a pie that the peasants used to make, which obviously often these peasant recipes do get lost because they're the ones that weren't written down. So that is in there. And also there is a recipe for filo, and like doing your own filo, but then of course you have to watch 1,000 YouTube videos and like try and get the technique, and even then it's very difficult.
I'm just wondering, did you ever ask the Yiayias about their relationships with their Yiayias and anything that they remembered about that, and also perhaps some of these things that you were sharing about how things were changing and their ideas about how the role of the Yaya was changing?
Yeah, so I think with that question, it's quite difficult to put a question like this to I'll use my own yaya as an example. She's not from a generation of women or a sort of like, let's say, class of women that are very introspective or very reflective. And I have asked her about her yaya before. And she's like, I don't know, it was a long time ago, I don't remember. You know, it's that sort of like, it's almost like an unwillingness to delve into your emotions because they've had a very hard life and they're not used to having someone ask them these emotive questions that make them feel sensitive. It's almost like an instant like, you know, like, don't ask me this question, you know. And so if I were to ask my yaya about the role of the yaya, like it just, I think she would be like, what are you asking me? Like, why are you asking me this question? Because it's just like what she had to do in her life is just the fact of her life. It's just how she had to live. She had no other choice. I have a funny anecdote. I won't take very long, but when the first book came out, Drew Barrymore, the actress, found it, and she wanted to do like a cook, like have me and Yaya on her cooking show, which we did do, and obviously I was being the granny agent. I was translating between Drew Barrymore and Jessica Alba and my Yaya, and Drew Barrymore's asking me like, so could you ask Yaya about like my veggie box at the end of the week? Like, could I make this recipe with like veggies in my veggie box? Meaning the thing that the box that she gets delivered each week that has random vegetables in it. And I was like, God, how do I explain veggie boxes and that whole concept to my Yaya? You know, it's something so alien to her that it's definitely not like these questions. I think I don't ask pointed questions like that, and I try and see what comes out because I feel like a lot of them lived very hard lives, and sometimes I do ask questions because I'm interested, depending on the moment and what's already coming. But I try and be respectful of like the woman and what she's like willing to sort of like give away, and I often can read. Is she going to be open to this kind of like line of questioning? And I think questions that we probably wouldn't find very intrusive, because I don't think it's a very intrusive question. I think it's a very, like, I would like to know as well. I think some of these ladies might find a bit like, like too much. Yeah. So I don't know if I answered that very well.
I have a question, but first, you do a very good Drew Barrymore impression. I wasn't expecting, like, talking about the relationship with Yiayias and grandchildren, it made me relate so much. I wasn't expecting that. And I think, to me, in the end, it made the silence a bit loud about the mothers, like the second layer. And were some of them involved in this, like curious about it, did for you or some other grandchildren change, made you think about the relationship that you have with your mother, if it can change, or if there is something that, well, I hope it's not an indiscreet question. So.
Big topic.
I have a very difficult mother to relationship, so
How do we get started on this?
Yes, maybe for other people, but some mothers involved.
There weren't that many mums involved. Maybe that was
Like
just
curious, or wife wasn't interested, or did you keep like this?
No, I don't know. Weirdly, not that. There were like the daughters of some of the grandmas. I guess like the mothers of the grandchildren. Like they were some daughters of the yayadas were the granny dealer in some instances. So there were like, but I guess they weren't a mum figure there because the grandchild then wasn't there, so I didn't view them as that. But they were the daughter of the yaya, so I guess there was the daughter and the mother relationship there. So yeah, there were like some mums, but there wasn't necessarily like, I don't know whether I like omitted that on purpose. I don't know. But it's funny because like the whole thing, like my whole brand is matriarchies and talking about mothers and the Yiayias and, you know, the idea of mothering, but I do think that often like grandmothers step in where a mother, like they fill the gap where sometimes a mother has been lacking for like out of choice or out of like necessity, right? Because many mothers had to work, and especially here in Greece, the Yiayias are the ones who are the mothers, because the mums like my mum's generation had to go out and work. But yeah, it's interesting. There was sometimes conversations about how different it is to be a grandmother to being a mother, because obviously the Yiayias had been mums in the past. And so many say that they preferred being grandmothers. Because I think there's a lot more pressure on you when you're a mum. By the time you're a grandma, you're not like the main caregiver. You're the one that just like tries to sneak in sugary snacks when you're not supposed to. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Here? The whole idea of women having menopause after a certain age seems to, of course we don't have evidence for this, but it seems to make sure that they cannot have any more children of their own, so that they can take care of the ones that are smaller and that are not theirs, that are from the next generation. It creates some kind of security, so that there won't be more competition, there won't be more children, and they can take care of the ones that already exist without exhausting themselves. So the grandmother is actually, it's the ultimate form, you know? The mother is just a step while getting there.
Which is almost what I'm trying to say about like, you know, the matriarch, they're the ones that like hold, the Yiayias are the ones that like hold the family together. Yeah.
I do. You do.
Oh, thank you. I have two questions, if I may. One is, you touched on this before, and you're the perfect viewer to be asking. I'm a cook. I just moved here. I'm in the process of trying to understand Greek cuisine. I've noticed that the Turkish Greek thing is a touchy subject. How, as a food content creator, do we navigate this? I have a Turkish really good friend who's always like, that's not Greek, it's Turkish, it's called this, you stole it. And he gets real upset.
It's true, we did.
How do we navigate that?
No, I'm joking. I don't think there's much to navigate, because before Greece was Greece and Turkey was Turkey, and like these nations were formed, and I don't know, the British decided that everyone was like, you know, Greece was Greece and Turkey was Turkey. Let's not even touch on Israel and Palestine. Like before all these nations were formed, we all were part of one empire and we were neighbors, right? Like you would come and go to my church and I would go and like pray to Allah and make sure that like I was on the good side of both of them. And like this is what I've learned from these like women, that like actually maybe you spoke different languages and you had different religions, but actually the food is actually what united people. And that's the most amazing thing. So what you say and how you navigate that is, I say like, hey, it's not Turkish and it's not Greek. Actually what it was Ottoman, eh? It was Ottoman, and before that it was something else, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's food is ever evolving, and why does it have to be one thing or another thing? Why can't it just be an incredible dish that we all have variations of, but that also unites us? Because, you know, you make baklava with,
Without cinnamon, for sure.
without cinnamon. I love cinnamon. I had a bit of baklava with cinnamon. We can have a conversation about it and say, you know, I'd like to try your baklava without cinnamon. You know, like, I know, you're turning it into a fight. It's not a fight.
That's the thing. That's how I see it as well. But yeah, I was wondering what the Greek
No, I
perspective
really,
was.
what I've learned is that yes, of course, there's so much overlap, and I'm not a purist.
Yeah,
Like, I
too
don't
much
think it has to
nationalism.
be. I mean, we'd have like no dishes at all, right? We'd all still be just eating like flatbreads or like raw meat if there was no like invention or like taking a dish and like experimenting with it and doing something different. And no, I think it's a great conversation starter to say, you do it this way. Oh well, my mom makes it this way, but my, you know, like
It's a conversation starter,
Yeah.
that's it. Like,
yeah.
It's also food evolution.
Yeah.
It's like recipe evolution.
Yeah, which also says something about like history and diet, like the movement of people, and
Absolutely.
yeah, like it's our heritage. It's, yeah.
But let's
And,
add something that also is included in Anastasia's book Yaya, is that before people from Turkey came to Greece with the big refugee wave of 1922, the food here was quite bland. They didn't use spices, they didn't eat spicy food, hot food at all. So Greeks themselves say
Not
no.
No, because no, sorry. I think we're twisting some of the words. No, because for sure the Ionian Islands and some other islands like Crete were on the spice trail, and the Venetians brought spices in like the 1400s.
So this was about Athens, that they were not.
But for sure Athens. Athens was a village. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think someone was trying to make this into their imagining. No, not true. For sure, the courtyards had loads of spice.
Sorry, and the second question is unrelated. Was there anything that surprised you? Because if you look back at Yiayias and back in the day, there were a lot of things that we take for granted now that they did not have. Was there anything that one of the Yiayias said that we didn't have that, or we didn't eat that, or we didn't use that?
No, when you ask me that question, it's not exactly, I don't know if it's the answer that you're looking for, but what I noticed was, especially with this book, there's loads of pasta, like loads of homemade pasta being made over many generations, which I don't think was influenced by Italy. I think it was just what was going on here, and they had their own version of like their own pasta here. And I was quite surprised by that. Like there's this little village on Karpathos called Olympos, and it's like a hair-raisingly sickening drive to get up to this tiny village, like on the cliff edge, and there's like rocks coming down off the mountain. And only for the past 15 years have they actually had a road that goes to the village. Before that, it was just donkeys, and it was a day to get to the other side of the island. And their dish in this village is macarones, which is the traditional pasta that they make. So they were cut off from the rest of the world, and they were making pasta. So that was a pleasant surprise that made me think, everyone loves pasta. Sorry, I know that wasn't very insightful, but that's just what came to mind.
Yes, lovely answer. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, I'm just loving the photographs of the kitchens, that in itself is just a piece of social history, and I'm just wondering if the Yiayias talked about their kitchens, because they seem really frozen in time, somewhere around the 70s and 80s. Obviously, presumably the high point of maybe marital finance or, of financial stability. Did they talk about that, and like that oven where the fridge is, where they can't even get to the house because the fridge is there, whatever? Did they wish for more, hope for more? How did they think about their kitchen?
There was one Yaya, Vali in Kifisya, who's like, that's sort of like for those of you that don't know very much about Athens geography, it's like the well-heeled of Athens, live in Kifisya and have done for a while. And, she was quite a fancy Yaya, but she was super embarrassed of her kitchen because it was like completely frozen in time, 1970s kitchen, and she was like, I wish that you weren't taking photos in here, and what are my kids gonna say? My kids told me to have a refit, and I don't know, like why haven't I done it? And she just kept talking about how embarrassing the kitchen was, and obviously me and Marco were like, wow, Marco's like, see ya, like he's like in every corner like photographing. And then there's another lady, Vespina, her house was amazing. I don't know if you've seen the picture of the flowery sofa, and then the four beaky that are lined up on in the yellow cabinet. Yeah, her house used to be a Cafe Neon and the Padopolio, and she just spoke a lot about like how much money they had, like in the 70s. She was like, we used to take it to Pirea in a suitcase, and we bought our house in Pirea like with this money that I took in 2 suitcases, and what you just said about like economic stability. she was like, I was in charge of all the books. Like, it was really her heyday, you know. And what I noticed was that she's kept everything in there. Like, she was super excited to show me and Marco that, like, that's where we used to have the booth where people could phone. Like, they were the only phone in the village in this Pantopolio, and people would go and like get in the booth and like call whoever. And yeah, she was very excited to be like, yeah, this is where the Cafe Neon was, and of course the Mosaico is still the same on the you know, like, and I was a bit like, God, I wish this was still the Cafe Neon, but she's living in it. It's her house, and that is also another amazing thing about doing this project, that you're just like, the yayadas that you see that live behind these like beaded curtains or the like crochet we're like welcomed into their homes, and yeah, it's kind of amazing. Like you're like going into museums in a way. It's really cool.
Did the others ever speak about things they really hated eating as a kid, and as a result they wouldn't pass it down to like next generation?
No, because again, it's like I answered to the lady here earlier, like they just didn't have a choice. It's not like ours, like, oh God, I didn't like cod and parsley sauce that my mum would always try and shove down me. They didn't have a choice. It was like post-war, they didn't have, you don't eat. Like, if you don't have what you're given, you don't eat at all, and you starve and you die. Like, I know that sounds really harsh, but one of my Yaya's brothers died of starvation, like during the war. Like, that's just what happened. So I know.
As economic times have kind of got a bit better, they stop making certain things, like eating donkey hooves or something like that.
Yeah, no, I've not. No, I never had that really. In fact, actually, what I usually say, like, what's your favorite food? And they even think that's a ridiculous question. They'll just say, I eat everything, you know, because I think they're from that generation, especially the Greek
don't waste
Yiayias.
food.
Yeah, especially the Greek Yiayias who lived through like awful times of poverty here, even post, you know, like my dad talks to me about his childhood in a village in Corfu, and that was in the 70s, and you know, like he was saying some kids couldn't even afford shoes. Like, it was really Greece, I mean, obviously still is a bit late to catch on in many things. Like, it was a different world, especially in villages, like the rural extremities of the periphery, like, of Greece. So no, they're always quite surprised when I ask them, what do you like to eat? They're like, everything, I'll eat anything, you know, that's the attitude that they have.
Not really a question, I just had a comment on that. Like, my own granny refused to tell us what she really loved to eat. So we all knew what she loved to eat, and my mum would always serve this to her, and she always pretended it was just
What was it?
no biggie to her.
What was it?
I think it was a particular piece of the lamb.
Yeah.
The tail, I think.
Yeah.
And my mum was always, oh, I kept this for you, and she was like, why?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then she would always like walk it down, and she was so happy. But I think they just don't want to say.
In the same way, Yaya goes to a restaurant and she always pretends that she hates eating out, and she's like, I don't want anything. No, I don't want that. I don't want it. And then I always know, I'm like, what is it? Gifted-like or macaroni Mickey Mouse? Because I know that it's either gifted or macaroni Mickey Mouse. She always does the same thing when she goes out, and I know that that's her favourite. Because also when she's suggesting meals, she's like, what do you want, macaroni Mickey Mouse? And I'm like, I think that's what you want. Yeah.
Did you have that problem with any of the other grannies? Like, I know after trying to communicate with Joanna's granny a few times, even with a translator in the thing, it's kind of like the communication just breaks down immediately, and she does whatever she's going to do.
Yeah.
And you've just got to try and catch up and try and sort of piece it all together.
Yeah, sometimes that's happened where I've shown up and we've discussed with them, like with them or with the grandchild, the mediator, like what we're gonna cook, and then they're like, okay, but I also thought I'm gonna do this, and I've made these, and just, you know, and then suddenly there's like this feast being laid out, and you're like, okay, cool. Remember when we went to see me? And there was like, we get there and we didn't know what was going on. Like, they were making those keftedes with a tiny fish, but then they were also doing all this other stuff. The kitchen was chaos.
They're frying everything.
yeah, they were like making lukumades. We arrived and they're like, lukumades? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, come and see how we make the lukumades. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm here to do the keftedes with you and we're on a time schedule and it's this tiny island and we have to get the ferry back. And they're like, yeah, but the lukumades and then we're going to do this. I'm going to fry some chips. And I'm like, okay, cool. You just have to like go with it because they're opening up their homes to you and they're super excited to host you. So yeah, that definitely happens, but you can't say no, can you? Yeah.
There's someone there at the back, then you. You asked the question already?
I already asked.
Then Galit can go first.
Sure, and thank you so much. I'm just wondering if you've gone back and shared the photographs or the books with the Yiayias and what their response has been.
I've had some videos which are nice to see. Yeah, really nice. I'm trying to think like Vai actually called me, the lady from the Kifisya kitchen, and she actually said, "Oh, my kitchen didn't come out that badly." And then one of the ladies, Theoclia, I don't know if I put a picture of her in the slideshow, but she did the Kuludakia. She actually came to the book launch, and she was super sweet. Like we did the book launch in English, and her daughter was translating everything to her. And then she was really sweet at the end. She said thank you, and she was very humbled, and she was very moved. And yeah, it's nice to. And then I get pictures, obviously, from the grandchildren who have given the books to their yayanas. And
Are they all gotten it?
yeah, most of them. I think there's one in Castellorizo who I still like haven't been able to track down. And then there's one lady she died. She died, and we're wanting to like send her more photos, like a bigger selection of photos, because they have the book, the grandkids have the book, but we took photos of her and like 5 generations of women, like her daughters, her granddaughters, and the granddaughters that had had kids, and they were like, it was like a fresh little baby. When
All
we went.
girls.
Huh?
They're all girls.
Yeah, they were all girls. Yeah,
5.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's really nice to be able to like document these women in that way. Because of course, like anyone can take a photo on an iPhone, but to have someone come and interview them and the stories are always in the grandmother's words. Of course, there's an introduction to each grandma from me, but then it's always what the woman said to me, direct, like how she said it, and I take it verbatim. Of course, I translate it, but
You recorded all of these
Yeah, yeah.
conversations,
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
had to go over hours of stuff.
yeah, yeah.
You had a question?
Mine's kind of in the spirit of the missing mothers. What about the missing husbands who are still alive? Kind of what role did they play when you were in the houses? Were there some, for example, that were quite active in the kitchen, they were cooking together as partners?
There
Or
weren't that many of them. Like most of them died. Most of them had died or were away. Yeah, like there weren't that many. There was Mr. Belos who kept coming in to check that Lily was doing everything right, and then there was. Were there any other papudas? Like, I'm trying to think. Like they really were. Remember? Despina, the lady that did the risotto on
Yeah, I was
Greek,
thinking,
and there was one guy. He had a leather jacket on, he had his hair all slicked back, and he was just reciting poetry. And he really kept trying to like steal the show. And I was like, well, I'm not here for you. But he was really sweet and very funny, and he was a poet. He just kept making up poetry about his life, about the world. He was clearly an extrovert. Yeah. But he wasn't giving tips on how to cook or anything. He wasn't cooking at all. Like he just sat while she like fawned around him and like made him a coffee and like gave him some food, and he just sort of like sat and like recited his poetry. Yeah.
You have another question for you,
Yes.
Dalia?
I was wondering if all the Yiayias are from the same generation, or at least not very far in age. And you said that it was very hard to get to ask emotional question, but were they at least having an awareness of the history of the region, not only of the food, and if you came across like different version of what they would say about the region. I mean, how much their memory is credible, let's say.
Sorry, what was the first question? I'm just thinking that I heard of it.
If they are all from
Yeah.
the same generation.
So no, they weren't all from the same generation. They were, I think there were some ladies in their 60s. So they were anything from 60 and above. I think the oldest one was like late 90s. And with credibility, I think that's an interesting one because we all have our own truths. I think I wasn't, because each grandmother was sort of representative of a different region, I wasn't seeing that many people from the same area. For example, in Michelini, I met two ladies. In Castellorizo, I met two ladies, and they were from different generations. So, for example, there was one, Kyria Maria, and then there was Kyria Eleni in Castellorizo. Kyria Maria was like 96 or something, and she had loads of stories to tell. You almost couldn't stop her, like, spilling these stories. And I was obviously there, just like, tell me more, you know. And she had a very different opinion on, I guess, like, Turkish relations, because obviously Castellorizo was so close to Turkey than Kyria Eleni did. But because they weren't from the same generation, it was very difficult to like sort of compare and contrast like their version and telling of events. And I think actually Kyria Maria was saying that she's the last survivor of the shipwreck. There was a ship coming back from Egypt when a load of Greek refugees were finally told you can return to your islands after living in Alexandria, I think it was, after the war. And she was on a ship and she told me the story about how they lost her younger sibling. Like, she was a baby and they lost the baby in the sea and the baby drowned. And she like, it felt like she was reciting the story from like a week ago, you know. It was like it was obviously a trauma for her, but it's a story that she's told a lot of times. But obviously as a journalist, I know that these stories get warped, not just with time and with age, but also according to like the emotions, the perspective, the context. We tweak things for ourselves.
Embellish them.
Or like to make things easier on ourselves sometimes. So it's an interesting point because you never really know because you're just going off what people are telling you. Yeah, it's interesting, but maybe in the next one, I'll go deeper into like fact checking these like historical events. But lots of the time, it's like personal things that happen to them, you know. Like she's telling me about her baby sibling that got lost in the sea, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if someone's gonna make that up, but maybe she's not commenting on a bigger, grander thing. It's almost like holding over a microscope over there, like over history at a certain time, right? And then like you're just like zooming in like so narrowly into a tiny part of this huge story. It's like weaving, I always say it's like weaving together a tapestry, and they all like brought different colours and threads to the whole thing and made it a lot more like visceral and like human for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was a good question.
Any more questions?
Is there going to be a Greek version of the book?
A Greek what?
A version of the book in Greek.
Contact your Greek publisher mates
Okay.
and tell them, because I have a very good publisher in the US, in the UK and in the US, and in Germany they have like a bidding war between 9 publishers to get this published in German. And I keep saying, guys, like people keep asking me about a Greek version. It's the Greek market. Like someone at a Greek publishing house has to say, oh, we want to buy the rights and translate it. Which obviously isn't down to my publisher and it's not down to me. I know for sure that they've done the reaching out. It seems very strange to me because lots of Greek people want the book in Greek. Yeah, I had to battle to get it into the airport in Athens, and then I saw it there a few weeks ago and I was like, about time. Yeah.
One
more questions?
What are the differences between Greek grandmas and other nationality grandmas? Like, did you find any difference?
Yeah, Greek Yiayias are sterner. They're like, oh yeah, for sure. They're like fiercer. Yeah, they're fiercer. I think they're kind of akin to like, I lived in Palermo and I cooked with lots of nonnas in Sicily. They're very similar to like Sicilian grandmas. Like they're very like, you know, a bit harsh, like not very cuddly and cutesy. They're not like doing the knitting. They're like cutting and wry and they have good humor, and I think it's because they've lived through a lot. Yeah, I don't know. They're like a different breed of women, I think, and also like living in such a patriarchal society, they have to be strong. You know, forever since from when you're born here, you're told your brother is better than you, your brother is better than you, serve your brother at the table, make your brother's bed, you know, like that's definitely my experience. Like, you know, it's common in Greek families. When I was pregnant, the whole time we were traveling to meet people, to meet these grandmothers, many of the families, they would say girl or boy, and I'd say girl, and they'd be like, maybe next time. So I think Greek Yiayias yeah, like they're fiercer and they're stronger, and even like the cutesy looking ones that I met were very like funny and sharp with their wit, and like you don't want to get on the wrong side of them. Yeah. Yeah.
No more questions. We have covered the subject.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was amazing.
So the book is on sale there at the back by the Amadis. You can get it. And Anastasia. And also, I don't know if there's any left, but I made some melo macarona based on the recipe from this book, and it came out amazing. If there's any left, you can try them. If not, buy them, you can make them yourselves.